Minnesota Vikings, the Seattle Seahawks. Minnesota travels all the way out to Seattle for this one and pick up a victory, 27-24. Top 5 graded Minnesota Vikings as the victors in this game. Justin Jefferson at the very top of the list with an 81.5. Edge rusher Pat Jones the second with an 80.1. Safety Josh Metellus with a 77.9. Guard Blake Brandell with a 76.2. And then cornerback Shaq Griffin, a 75.3. Sam Darnold in this one. Big time throws for Sam Darnold here, 78.4. Defensive tackle Jarran Reed for the Seattle Seahawks. He's at the top of the list, an 86.5. Cornerback Devon Witherspoon with a 75.9. Wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba, 75.8. Cornerback Josh Jobe, a 75.4. And then cornerback Tyreek Woolen with a 74.1. Geno Smith in this game, a 68.6. Stat that told the story, Dalton. What do you got?
Okay, I'm just going to circle back to what we said last week, and this team's pass protection, there's a very good chance it's going to sink them out of the postseason. That's where we're at, 37.7 pass blocking grade for Seattle. Geno's doing all he can. Grading a 68 when you're under pressure 48% of the time is actually really impressive. It's so hard right now. They got Oluwatimi back at center, but he struggled. Sato Lamea at right guard. He's a guy who shouldn't be out there, honestly. He's just not at an NFL level of pass protection yet. This is what I was worried about last week when I told you with Green Bay where their pass protection completely collapsed, and now it collapsed even further in this game, which doesn't surprise me at all considering they're playing Brian Flores. Brian Flores used the most stunts that he's used in a game since week 4. He knew. He already knew. He goes, I'm gonna get the mug look going in the A gaps. I'm gonna stunt the crap out of this interior, and we're gonna pressure Geno Smith because we know we can. 48% of the time, Geno was under pressure. Both of his interceptions under pressure. One in the first half that led to a field goal. The one at the end of the game that finished it was a 3-point game. That's where we're at. The Seahawks, with where their offensive line is at, especially in the interior, they can't pass protect. And for as good as Geno's been, for as good as Jackson Smith-Njigba's been, for as DK Metcalf, all of that, there is a reason that the Rams, look at the Rams, their offensive line and their pass protection is surging. The Seahawks is falling apart. That's why the Rams have taken over first place. That's where we're at right now. I can't stress it enough. You just cannot be a postseason team, or especially a deep postseason team, with an offensive line playing like this.
On the other side of things, I'm going to give kudos to Sam Darnold specifically in one category. Now, overall, 22 for 35, 246 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 76.8 passing grade, 2 big-time throws, 2 turnover-worthy plays. Specifically, though, Dalton, I want to praise his play in the red zone. 91.4 passing grade in the red zone. He had one of those big-time throws while he was in the red zone. And I remember a couple weeks ago, maybe it's more than a couple weeks ago now at this point, we were talking about Sam Darnold in the red zone, and we were praising Sam Darnold for a great year that he was having, but we were saying, hey, he's close to the league lead in turnover-worthy plays in the red zone. Or at least I think, even at one time, I think he led the NFL in turnover-worthy plays.
I remember the Jacksonville game specifically, yeah.
When he racked up another one, it was like, okay, now I think he's number 1 in the NFL in terms of turnover-worthy plays when we get into the red zone. The Vikings offense at that point was humming along. Everything was going well, including Darnold. Darnold was playing well, but in the end zone, he was taking a lot of unnecessary risks. He was just putting the ball in harm's way, and he was throwing the turnovers when he got into the red area. Since week 11, Sam Darnold, in one of the few areas where he wasn't already playing at such a very high level, 87.3 passing grade, 3 big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays that he has in the red zone. We're running out of areas to go, if you just put Sam Darnold in this situation, he's not going to perform well. I don't know how many we have anymore. Under pressure, he's great. Between the 20s, he's great. Outside the numbers, he's great. Over the middle of the field, he's great. In the red zone, he's great. And again, I go back to what we talked about last week. How do you let this quarterback walk? I don't think you can. So we're all going to go through the offseason exercises of, who's going to sign Sam Darnold. He could go here. He could go here. At this point, I think the Vikings would be crazy to let him go. I think they'd be crazy because of how well he is playing in basically every area that you would want him to play. And like you've mentioned when we talked about this, he's still young. What's he going to be, 27 next year? He's still a young quarterback. He's still got so much time. It's not like you're signing like an old vet. It's actually probably the more ideal situation. Anyways, Sam's been incredible in the red zone. One area where he really needed to get better, and he absolutely has. Most impressive for me, I will go to actually Seattle side of things. There's a lot of most impressive that we could talk about with Minnesota's, but Jarran Reed, their interior defensive lineman, he's 32 years old. He's on a 1-year contract. He's a free agent this coming off season, and he's still playing at a really high level. This past game, you saw him at number 1 on the list in terms of grades for Seattle players. He had a 91.2 pass rush grade in this game. He beat his defenders on 5 separate snaps, 3 pressures, 30.2 pass rush win percentage, and he's just like a grown man out there. I mean, he was just forklifting and bulldozing the interior defensive lineman for the Minnesota Vikings, or sorry, the interior offensive lineman, excuse me, for the Minnesota Vikings, and he was just playing very, very well, even got himself a sack. So Jarran Reed, really nice day from him, impactful performance, and a good year for him going into another free agency season, and he'll be about 33 years old.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. I'm with you on Darnold, man. I pay the man. I think at this point it's simple. We're running out of things to criticize him for, and look, they're 13-2. The 13-2. They win their last 2 games. They are the top seed. The NFC title goes through Minnesota, which I don't think none of us had preseason. That's for darn sure. You could not find a soul that would say, "Oh yeah, the Vikings have a chance to go 15-2 in the 1 seed." Yeah, that makes sense. Right. I mean, pay the man. I get it. JJ McCarthy, I'll figure that out later. I wouldn't even worry about it. You can't have a guy playing at this level walk out the door. And I think if you're Darnold with the weapons and the situation and the familiarity with Kevin O'Connell, I don't think you want to leave either. I wouldn't. I mean, would you want to? Let's say the open spot is the team that gets left out of Cam Ward or Sanders. Right now, what if it's the Raiders? Would you go to the Raiders right now if you were Sam Darnold? Over this team that you're on now? Absolutely not.
Nope.
I think they have to figure out a way to get that done. Pay the man. I got to talk about a guy they paid this past off season though. And again, I think I've probably done it 3 or 4 times this year. Andrew Van Ginkel, what a great ad for this defense, and I want to highlight what he did in the second half of this game because sometimes they talk about as pass rushers, you need a closer. That's the numbers of a closer right there. That's the Mariano Rivera of football right there is what that is, closing. 90.1 pass rush grade in the second half, 6 pressures, 2 sacks. I mean, and he's all over the place. When I talk about Brian Flores running these stunts, it's because Van Ginkel could be anywhere from the edge to the A-gap to the slot to linebacker to wherever. He's just a football player. He's not, it's not the same as a Trey Hendrickson or a Myles Garrett where you know where he is every play. You have no idea where he is on any given play. I think it's one of the biggest problems when you're trying to block Minnesota is just where the hell is he? Because we don't know. Again, in the A-gap, he could be twisting around the center. In the other A-gap, he could be, head up on your tackle and speed rushing by him. I mean, there's so many options that Van Ginkel gives Brian Flores. Once again, the perfect player, just the perfect player to be in this exact defense, and he has been everything that they paid for. Honestly, an absolute bargain considering what they gave him. Van Ginkel in the second half of this game, absolute monster.
Yeah, he's been the perfect player for Brian Flores, like you mentioned. Most disappointing for me is Seahawks run game, but more of just the philosophy towards the run game. I know Kenneth Murray is sort of coming back, but 12 designed carries in this game in the running backs, despite barely being out of a 1-score game all day. There was a point in time where it was a 10-point deficit. It was 7-17, but most of this game was a 1-possession game, and you only ran the football 12 times. You had the offensive line that we've talked about, and you're asking them to pass protect that entire game. I like Ryan Grubb. I think he's incredibly aggressive. I think that he sticks to his guns. And I think he calls a game plan the way that you need to go get big wins in this league. So I do like him. But there have been a handful of games where I'm like, you've got to run the football more. You've got to be more balanced by design or balanced by game plan than the Seahawks have. And I understand when you're struggling on the offensive line, you're probably going to struggle to run the football too. But 12 designed carries for a team that gives up as much pressure as the Seattle Seahawks do on the offensive line, and for a game that was barely outside of a 1-score game the entire time, is just not nearly as balanced as you need to be, in my opinion. So To me, that's the most disappointing part. The philosophy towards the run game, I think, is putting a lot on Geno Smith's shoulders. I think it's putting on a lot of unnecessary stress on an offensive line that we already know has been struggling. So that was disappointing to me. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, just the most disappointing thing. It's something I've kind of harped on the last couple of weeks. Just their playoff hopes are getting slimmer and slimmer. And I'm pretty sure with Green Bay already beating them and the way conference records are with Washington, I'm not even sure it's possible for Seattle to get a wild card spot. I think it really is going to come down to now. Next week, they have to beat the Bears. That's a must-win, and obviously they're favored. But, with this offensive line, you never know what happens. And then that Rams game in Week 18, it's just going to come down to that. And right now, I can't say I'd give Seattle the advantage with the way the Rams' defensive line is playing, the way the Rams are playing on both sides in the trenches, and then this Seattle offensive line. I have it's 2 weeks to go, and it's still entirely possible if they beat the Rams, but I wouldn't favor them in that scenario right now.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can come one today.